And it's honestly an insane time to be living in America right now.
Well, I don't know if I don't know whether we can be political. I mean, I guess it's my podcast, so I can do what I want.
Sure.
But it's whether it's what you wanted to talk about. Because, I mean, out of my friends, there aren't actually too many that are Americans. So it'd be cool to hear your kind of insight on basically what's happening in America right now. Because from especially a British perspective, where police brutality isn't, and forgive me if, I'm wrong maybe, but police brutality in the UK isn't really commonplace. I wouldn't say personally. You don't see it much in the news or whatever. But in America, it comes across as a different place where there's almost literally, I mean, there is a war right now, isn't there, happening between cops and the public. And it just makes me think about how lucky we are in the UK. However that came about, I don't really honestly know. But it seems like there's a real difference between a police service where the police can police by consent is what, basically the model that the Metropolitan Police was modelled on in the UK back in like the 1800s. But then there's other countries, not just America, obviously it's important to mention that, where it's like they police by force and it literally is a police force. So, I mean... I don't know how quite to like succinctly word the question, but I mean, what are your thoughts on it right now? How did it happen, Ben? Tell us how it all happened.
Well, it all started with, I mean, seriously, it's been a problem always. You can't separate the history of America with the history of oppression of Black people. And that's just how it is. And I think it's important to acknowledge that police forces in America, like primarily, were tasked with, at one point, returning Black people who were freed back to their former slave owners. I mean, there's a really problematic history of policing in America, and it's kind of insane, everything that's happening, honestly, but it is so important, I heard a quote the other day, I think it was Martin Luther King said, riots are the language of the unheard, which is so profound. Yeah. And obviously that's what's happening right now, regardless of the color of your skin. This should outrage you, it's been going on for too long. But yeah, I mean, my personal feelings about it, I don't want to get too much into it because as a white person, I don't feel it's my place to necessarily say anything other than it's really sad. My heart breaks for our Black brothers and sisters in America who are probably afraid to go out right now. And if you can join in the protests, I would definitely encourage that wherever they are. I know that there's some protests even in the UK, and I heard about some in Germany as well.
Yeah, I mean, there have been actually some demonstrations in Manchester, which is fairly close to home for me. Nothing on the scale of the likes you've seen in New York, which is understandable, of course. The proximity's different. Sure. The relationship's different. But it's a worldwide outcry, really, for what's happening in America. Because when I first came across the video, just on social media like everybody else, it genuinely struck me so hard I was almost moved to tears. It was so unfair. It was just so unfair. That was the thing. Especially when you look into what happened leading up to that. The guy was just he didn't do anything wrong. He was mistaken for, what was it, writing a bad check?
Or something like that.
And then insane. Like, what struck me even as well was like, when he was unconscious, it's just like he's unconscious. You can't subdue anybody more than that. And even in the UFC, which is like perhaps the most violent sport in the world, the ultimate fighting championship, like those guys, as soon as the guy goes limp, the fight's over. Even a UFC fighter doesn't carry on. So what possessed that police officer to carry on, just because like, everybody knows once someone's unconscious, either the blood flow is restricted to their head or they're not getting enough oxygen to their head. So they're going to die soon after.
It's really crazy. I mean, there's so many police officers on various forces, various precincts who should not be police officers. It's clearly like that man was one of them. There's a certain type of person it takes to be able to assess a situation with a clear head and move forward with appropriate action. I mean, the only appropriate action there was maybe talk to the guy. You know, and we see senseless killings like this. I mean, you know, anyway, I don't want to get too much into it, but clearly he did nothing wrong. You know, it was just a call about a potentially bad check, and it's really sad. I mean, I've been listening to the news every day and was genuinely moved to tears this morning hearing about yet another Black American killed by police.
Yeah, I mean, we can leave it there because it's just the more you talk about it, it just enrages you, and I completely understand like that feeling that you had this morning.